Whoever you are, whoever you love, however they love it, hello. As a general rule, I'm trying not to make these podcasts too esoteric. If, like the word esoteric, they only make sense to a small number of people with the right background knowledge, then praise tends only to come from my parents. And it feels somewhat disingenuous. Well, that is not going to happen this episode. At the behest of my girlfriend, we are going to tackle sex, relationships, love, commitment, and the joy of promiscuity. These are topics that we can all relate to, and I won't be sharing a link with my parents. Monogamy. Let's start there. Historically speaking, couples in lifelong exclusive relationships have been a great benefit to society. When a civilization finds itself organized into family groups that share the same roof and raise little ones together, any unruly individuals that churn out illegitimate babies with anyone they fancy pose a very real threat to the stability of that society. In cases of infidelity, the kids lose, the families lose, and the players themselves lose when their own kin get played or they themselves get lynched. Monogamy helped early societies to thrive by compelling people to own up and support their own offspring. And by people, I of course mean men. The problem is, as you might have guessed, for as long as we've been mammals, people have had instinctual promiscuous desires. Only around 10% of mammal species and 30% of apes form lifelong pair bonds. This presents some pretty substantial evolutionary baggage for us to overcome. Despite these desires and urges having very natural origins, any culture that we're born into is likely to tell us that we're wrong for having these feelings. Only bad, sinful, sick, or flawed people could harbour such shameful thoughts. Despite the global ubiquity of this feature of human psychology, every citizen is expected to live out their entire life pretending not to have such impure thoughts. Frankly, admitting to them can create something of a scandal even today, or at least a subtle kick under the dinner table. Billions of people throughout history beating themselves up internally over biological urges that they can't control. Isn't that romantic? While romanticism as a movement may be a little outdated today, its myths and dogmas have become so ingrained that we rarely notice them. I'll be exploring the pitfalls in romanticism in a lot more detail next episode. For now, consider that humans have evolved to find sweet and fatty foods particularly pleasurable. This is because there was an advantage to pursuing these calorific treats in our hunter-gatherer past when resources were, on the whole, more scarce. We may in fact have heaps of old drives and instincts kicking around in our brains that actually act against us in modern society. Just because fidelity-promoting bonding hormones like oxytocin get released into the brain whenever two people have sex, doesn't mean that that couple are meant to be together. Soulmates, made for each other, drawn together by destiny. Though it often sure feels that way, it's possible that times have changed enough for us to ignore certain ancient inclinations, especially if they no longer provide the benefit that they once did. Maybe, just maybe, It's okay for us humans to enjoy sex beyond partnerships, the way that we enjoy food for reasons other than mere survival. Adolescence, in any species, is technically defined as the time from when an individual can reproduce to when an individual does reproduce. And in humans, this period is quite significant. Celibacy until marriage made a lot of sense in a time before contraception. When STDs ran wild and education was the privilege of men alone, it was wise for a woman to make her sexual encounters count. Although it seems archaic to us now, in the not-so-distant past, women couldn't support themselves without a man. To improve your prospects of getting married, which would secure you money, food, safety, and all the basic necessities of life, it was smart to withhold the one sought-after thing that you possessed. This basic social strategy was born out of the misogyny of yesterday's world, yet it has normalized our current view of monogamy. Should it persist as we lunge amorously at 2024? Or can we finally divorce sex from the rest of our relationship-specific commitments? Aubrey de Grey, author of The Overdue Demise of Monogamy, has some thoughts. Quote, "Monogamy is virtually mandated when a woman spends her entire adult life with young children underfoot, because continuous financial support cannot be otherwise ensured. But when it's customary for those of both sexes to be financially independent, this logic collapses." End quote. Removed from the risk of procreation and other communicable diseases, doesn't sex become morally equivalent to any other social recreation? When playing squash, meeting someone for a coffee, or taking a nice walk along the beach, it would be unreasonable for one partner to demand lifelong exclusivity from the other. If any of these pastimes could result in pregnancy, contagion, or desertion, a partner's possessiveness might be understandable. But they don't. Contraception has freed sex from its enduring association with trust. Like so many of our advanced social emotions, humanity's monogamous mentality comes pre-programmed by natural selection. This makes it highly resistant to cultural change. As usual, our mindset is slow to catch up with technological progress. As long as betrayal can be taken off the cards, and a couple's continued commitment to a shared future together remains intact, there's no reason to think that physical intimacy couldn't be enjoyed casually, with multiple partners as a normal part of human life. Like yoga. Easier said than accepted, I'm sure you'll agree, but not impossible. And done right, not a problem. Deliberately closing ourselves off to options and personal freedoms seems outdated in so many ways. Our thinking needs to be as open and flexible as possible, given how rapidly culture evolves. But currently, our sexual adventures are still being policed by another four-letter word. Society still insists, in most circles, that sex be an expression of love. Now, I know what you're thinking. What's love got to do with it? Love is like oxygen. It lifts us up where we belong, and it's the only thing that there's just too little of. But what is love? I'll tell you. Love is a very convincing bluff. The movie The Princess Bride actually got it pretty spot on, as true love and to Blathe are strikingly similar. Imagine that everyone carried a rating, a scorecard from 1 to 10 that signified how good a mate choice you would be. Why might any animal settle for anything less than a 10? If I'm currently shacked up with an 8, it's perfectly possible that someone better might come along. So, while this rating is quite high, I still shouldn't invest too heavily in the relationship, especially if I'm only a 3 and I'm likely to lose my partner to the nearest milkman. Such a brutally honest and very public rating system would make unconditional parental cooperation next to impossible. At some point, with our body clocks ticking on, it must be sensible to stick with the best catch that you've found so far. In order to do that, our devotion must be believable and very difficult to fake. This way, even when a more desirable option does happen to limp by, neither partner will be seduced to pull the plug. This imprinting, this pair bonding, this burning love evolved to tie monogamous species together. This means that we ought to be highly suspicious of any partner who would choose us for purely rational reasons. There is a good chance that they will abandon you for equally rational reasons somewhere down the line. Only a full-bodied, totally immersive, multi-sensory wonder drug like love can override someone's intellect enough for them to commit to another for life. Feelings of true love shouldn't be triggered by any sensible evaluation of an individual, their wealth, power, physical fitness, or any other objective merits. The emotion is a necessary ruse that our minds play on us to prevent partners backing out of promises. And we should put a cap on our investments until we can be sure that love is in the air. So this explains the why of animalistic love. To know what to do with it, we need to take a look under the bonnet. Like so many aspects of human personalities, our own unique impulses, intuitions, and attractions are built on early childhood experiences. The child is father to the man, and all that. As kiddies, we are showered with love in concert with all the horrors of growing up. We are let down, humiliated, punished, and emotionally manipulated in kaleidoscopic ways that obscure underlying acts of love until they become indistinguishable. The Disney Pixar movie Inside Out is a beautiful illustration of this. As self-respecting adults, we like to think that we're pursuing partners who will make us happy. Little do we know that what makes us happy is often simply familiarity. Those people who can subject us to just the right flavour and intensity of suffering that we considered loving when we were children are those most likely to convince us that their love is genuine. Here we hit on an important distinction between loving someone and feeling loved. If feeling loved is about being looked after and protected, loving someone ought to be the same in reverse, right? Not so. Many people try to build adult relationships on this assumption and end up being as possessive and overbearing as parents. Instead, loving someone has more in common with looking past their disagreeable behaviour to see well-meaning intentions beneath. Anyone we happen to fall for will likely embody a blend of good and bad traits. That's par for the course with humans. The madness of love is what's needed to interpret a person's actions favourably, allowing peaceful coexistence to continue. When assessing someone as potential relationship material, it's healthy to have a few non-negotiable traits in mind. It's also healthy and reasonable to love and hate someone simultaneously. For a partnership to work, we must do more than just bask in awe of our partner's strengths and beauty. We must accept that we, ourselves, are fatally vulnerable to getting attached. This laughs in the face of every defensive impulse that we have, as well as society's celebration of confident, independent personalities. In light of this weakness, the thought that our partner might be tempted by the fruit of another is bound to sit uncomfortably. It also saddles us with another complication. We must be wary of those characters who either want us too badly or too early on. When love takes the form of desperation or whimsy, we ought to return to swiping post-haste. So we're left with something of a social paradox. To appear maximally desirable, we can't come across as too needy or too fickle. So we have to somehow unambiguously announce our desires whilst simultaneously playing fiendishly hard to get. Here again, love gallops in to resolve the catch-22. It puts minimum standards in place for shortlisting candidates, then dramatically commits us to one of them. How compatible two people turn out to be hardly enters the equation. None of us are perfect. All of us are unpredictable and changeable in the long term. For these reasons, a relationship is an ongoing, daily negotiation. Love acts as a mediator, helping to accommodate all of our sparring incompatibilities. What we need to stay acutely aware of is whether we're acting voluntarily or being pressured. Feelings of obligation or entitlement may sit at the core of every toxic relationship. There's a simple test for this that you can try for yourself right now. Imagine your partner asking you for something important to them. If you say no, how is your partner likely to respond? Conversely, if your partner refused you a request, how might your relationship change? If either scenario promises to descend into argument, tantrum, hurt feelings, betrayal, outrage, or any kind of drama, the love that you share appears to be conditional. The long-term stability of a relationship depends on unconditional acceptance of each other, complete with all accompanying personal problems and opinions. When superficial benefits, given and received, are what knit partners together, any questioning of the status quo is going to seem like sacrilege. In my experience, and truthfully that's all I have, the most secure and lasting relationships have each shared a common understanding. Both parties need to accept that it's impossible to fulfill every single need that your partner has all of the time. That's not what a partner is for. Given that couples unavoidably hurt each other's feelings on occasion, the important thing is to support each other as you grow, both as individuals and as a team. Healthy relationships should be more concerned with enabling a partner to overcome their own difficulties, not in tempering the other's emotions or of avoiding conflict at all costs. Once we've found a good enough partner to warrant investing in, and learned how to interpret their hurtful behaviour with artful generosity, we're free to define exactly where our personal boundaries lie. There is nobility, not shame, in compromise. Or as Alain de Botton puts it, intimacy is the capacity to be rather weird with someone and finding that it's okay with them. Sweeping sexuality under a rug of shame creates more problems than it solves. For example, anthropologists have found that the more unaccepting a culture is of overt sexuality, the less its pornography reflects reality. The West's general attitude that lust is a sin to be resisted plays out in its pornographic material. Casting actors with the most exaggerated anatomy and overacting a scene beyond belief make it easier to distance ourselves from what's being portrayed on our screens. The only way to enjoy sex with someone other than your partner, even as a fantasy, seems to lie in keeping the action as cartoonish as possible. This creates an artificially narrow spectrum of sexual behaviours that people aspire towards from a young age. Normalizing such distortion is bound to leave an impression on anyone's psychology. Dysfunction, isolation, and feelings of inadequacy are exactly what we might predict. And this is where we return to the idea of rescuing sex from love. Now that we're awash with reliable forms of contraception, monogamy is off the hook as a practical cultural imperative. Our technological advancements have built a world where people don't need to repress this aspect of themselves any longer. Even so, through convention, the mechanism of love, and our hardwired insecurities, it will take more than a mere technological leap to harmonize biological drives with agreed cultural norms. Almost by definition, cheating is seen as a betrayal of trust. There's no mystery why sexual exclusivity and trust have always walked hand in hand. But today, they no longer need to. Sex has grown up. There's no reason why couples can't define their own boundaries, rationalize their emotions, untangle bad behavior from its trailing historic baggage, and flip the V's at societies that claim they can't. Whatever we choose to do, at the very least, we owe ourselves these kinds of conversations. If we don't scrutinize the norms that we're operating within, we risk living in a society that is far more oppressive than is strictly healthy or necessary. All those times that my girlfriend has walked in on me while I'm sitting on the toilet just to hand me a cup of coffee show that really nothing is sacred. But that's probably a conversation for another time. I have no illusions that many listeners will not fall head over heels for the ideas laid out in this episode, perhaps because they don't sound very romantic. For this reason, next episode will be dedicated to romanticism, how such a thing came about, and all the relationship problems that it tees up for us.